Okay, great. So let's begin. Hi, everyone. Very warm welcome to this panel discussion. My name is Sneha, and I work with the Open Knowledge Initiatives program at IIIT Hyderabad. My apologies, my camera is not working today, but I should try and get it working soon. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Future of the Commons Collective is something we started a couple of years ago after a conference organized by the Center for Internet and Society on AI, Indian languages, and archives. Since then, we have a small cohort that meets every month to share ongoing work, discuss various aspects of the digital knowledge commons, anything from digitization to open data, GLAM, cultural heritage, to AI, languages, and oral knowledge. We now have a new website where you can read a bit more about us and the monthly sessions. So do visit and do sign up for our sessions. This is our 15th FoC session, and this is a special one as today is International Mother Language Day. And all of this year, we're also celebrating Wikipedia's 25th birthday. So, our session today will reflect on this critical milestone for one of the largest community and volunteer led open knowledge movements across the world. But we also hope to discuss how Wikipedia and other such movements can continue to foster and sustain a robust, multilingual, inclusive, and accessible digital knowledge commons. So, with that, I would like to quickly move on to introducing our speakers, our panelists for today. Our first speaker is Runa. Runa is a language technology professional who has led initiatives to advance open knowledge centered around language and cultural equity. She led the language and localization operations of the Wikimedia Foundation for more than a decade, covering Wikipedia and its sibling projects globally in over 300 languages. So over to you, Runa, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Sneha. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me on the Future of Commons Talks. I hope I'm audible. In case I am not, okay, good. I see Sandeep. Thank you so much. So I also wanted to mention that it is indeed an honor that we are having this discussion today on the 21st of February, which is International Mother Language Day. And the origins of how it came about has a deep connection to the language that I also call as my own mother language, that is Bangla. And when we talk about knowledge in general, whether it's open, accessible, usable, formative, however, when also led into the context of language, automatically becomes relatable on an individual level. You start nodding along, you have your aha moments, you find those cultural markers that can immediately connect more personally with those topics. And then when we particularly talk about open knowledge, there is yet another layer, a sense of collective ownership, a joy of participation that comes from the act of being part of a bigger mission, whether you are just consuming what is available for you to take without any guilt, or whether you are making a contribution that you know will perhaps help someone else down the line at some point. It all comes together as a sense of selfless act, as a community connected on a personal idea of some sort. And on the topic of discussion today, Wikipedia and all of the Wikimedia projects is perhaps one of the brightest examples of this idea, where we have seen this happen for the last 25 years. It's often called the last best place on the internet. So what started as a geeky venture by a few individuals is now part of history, a lesson in how humans have built, learned, and shared information in a certain way from the year 2001 on a digital platform. And since then, we have seen so much change and so many shapes shifting so heavily in the intersecting space of information, technology, political systems, education, economics, and everything else within our societal structures that had over the many years defined how we as people live our everyday lives across the world in our own corners. And it is happening in real time in front of our eyes and with us in it. And now, after we had barely managed to settle ourselves to a new system that we thought we had made sense of, we see more radical changes overwhelming us again. So it's like a constant race with barely any time to catch our breath. So while we acknowledge and contemplate that reality, I have three specific points that I'd like to linger on today. And on my part, I'll try to emphasize those points when I'm offering a reflection or a response during our conversation. So please bear with me. The first point is the topic of the general relevance of openly accessible digital common goods. My position on this topic is that it is non-negotiable. A walled garden of information is only good for a few and is less nourished by its natural design. So when digital commons are open and accessible to the public, it will have a higher chance of growth and reuse, which in turn will contribute to a longer shelf life. The question some may ask is, does it not become more susceptible to harm versus the stagnation within the more protective walled garden spaces? Well, so does everything else at some point. The harm or risks just look different, either due to willful actions or general slowness of the system. These harms are often prevented from being visible. So the key point is how soon is the harm getting mitigated? And we have seen the effective example of how that is being done on Wikipedia and Wikimedia projects over the many years. The second point is the impact of fast-moving technology changes on the digital common goods, including platforms like Wikimedia. So my position on that topic is that it is a reality of how external changes work, just like Wikipedia or Wikipedia-like platforms that changed knowledge systems in 2001 in their own way. We are now seeing a different era of change, and it will challenge everything that currently exists. So specific patterns that are the outcome or side effects of those impact that cause those changes, they will need to be effectively monitored and studied so that we can learn what we are up against and then try to predict the changes we'll see in small or big ways. But in my opinion, the most important changes are the ones that will slowly creep in as harmless habits and will make us, that is people like you and me, to demand for alternatives to what we have today. So not just the companies and the organizations that are bringing in those big changes, but we as users will also play a part here. And the third point is about how the long-standing efforts around digital commons and open knowledge can sustain and coexist within a future by what now seems like a largely AI-driven reality. So my position on this point is that these efforts have sustained so far due to many factors that, but most importantly, due to a core mission and purpose. That is the integral axis that holds these efforts together in spite of all the changes that have impacted them over the years. So it would not be wise to assume that the status quo will not be challenged. It will be, and it might even be an uneven fight compared to the earlier years. However, it is still technology that is being built by humans. It is not sentient and can be directed or harnessed with willful intention towards opportunities that will still be relevant to that core mission. So I'll just stop here and I'll yield back to the panel and to Sneha.
Thank you. Thanks so much for those opening remarks, Runa. So I think we can move on to our next speaker. I'll just briefly introduce our speaker. Benjamin Mako Hill is an associate professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Washington and is a founding member of the Community Data Science Collective. He works to understand the social dynamics that shape online communities engaged in the peer production of digital public goods like Wikipedia and Linux. Over to you, Miko.
Okay, so I'm going to briefly, let's see if I can do this again. Okay. Choose a different window. Let's see this. Okay, so I've shared. Hopefully, a little. You can see my slide. So let me switch here. Okay. So I think that what I'm going to do is I'm sort of this is a major birthday. I mean, this event is in some way inspired by the fact that it's Wikipedia's 25th anniversary, and I think that what I want to do is reflect a little bit explicitly on the some of the life cycles within peer production projects more broadly and on Wikipedia in particular. I'm actually going to be presenting, these are a set of slides that I have from a talk that I've developed about a research project that I've been working on that sort of ties together a series of different empirical things that I've done in empirical studies that I've done in the context of studying sort of Wikipedia. So, and I should acknowledge this is collaborative work with a whole bunch of people, including a number of students in my lab, and in particular with a collaborator, Aaron Shaw, who's at Northwestern University. Let's just, I'm going to skip a couple of slides here. What I want to do is frame these sort of opening remarks in terms of what I think that I initially sort of really thought of as two pieces of bad news about the sort of growth and development of Wikipedia in particular, but actually peer production projects more broadly. And I sort of, yeah, two pieces of bad news. The first is something that a number of you have probably seen. This is a graph of the number of active editors, which is defined as people making, I think, 5 edits a month to English Wikipedia. And almost any way you cut it, English Wikipedia's contributor base has been in decline since early 2007. And this is a huge empirical puzzle that has led to an enormous amount of research, which I'll some of which I'll summarize in a minute. But I want to emphasize this is not just a story about English Wikipedia. I mean, it's exciting that it's Mother Tongue, International Mother Tongue Day. English is my mother tongue, but I've actually done a lot of work on a bunch of other of Wikipedia and editions in many other languages as well. And maybe there'll be some time to talk about that a little bit later, but it's not just English Wikipedia. This is the 8 largest Wikipedias in terms of the number of edits, and I want you to just briefly take away a few things. One is that this pattern is very general across wikis. The other is that it happens at extremely different sizes. English Wikipedia is much, much bigger than Polish Wikipedia in terms of, in almost really any way in which you cut it. That's the sort of the top left slide and the bottom right slide, but the patterns look extremely similar. And also that these things happen at very different points in time. Communities tend to, it's not just that something magically, a lot of the bigger communities experienced this period of sort of like growth, of sort of like the stopping of the growth, but around 2007, but actually many other of the projects, including smaller ones, have experienced it much later. And it's not just actually Wikipedia. This is actually a broader issue in Knowledge Commons. This is data from Wikia, which has sort of been rebranded as fandom.com. And this is the 1% of the largest wikis hosted by Wikia or Fandom, which is the largest commercial wiki hosting platform. And what you see is that this is sort of standardized both in terms of sort of number of active editors. So I'm sort of putting every wiki on their own scale because some are, of course, much bigger than others. And this is the top, I think, 700 or so wikis on that platform, and also standardizing them in terms of time because these wikis are being founded at various points in time. And this is a very, this seems to be a very general pattern that exists of sort of growth, maturity, and decline that happens over the course of, about 4 years. I've done similar stuff with free and open source software projects. I've done similar stuff in a range of different settings. And these life cycle dynamics of sort of growth, maturity, and decline seem to be rather common, and I should say unusual compared to many other sort of like social media sites, for example, which look more like these diffusion curves. They don't sort of turn into this period of decline. They sort of, at some point, you get all the people that are, you hit carrying capacity. But I think that this pattern of decline seems to be a feature of Knowledge Commons, sort of peer-produced Knowledge Commons more broadly. And a lot of people have studied this, including myself. And that's where sort of the second piece of bad news comes in, because it's the answer to this question. The reason is not because people have stopped showing up. The reason these communities are declining, including these Wikipedia communities are declining, is not because there is like a shortage of people that are wanting to contribute. It's that the it's that these communities our communities, including Wikipedia in particular, have become more formalized and bureaucratic. They've become more oligarchic. I published a paper that shows that essentially people that are present early in the beginning of these wikis tend to consolidate power as their interests sort of diverge from those of the other good faith contributors, and they become more difficult to contribute. Basically, and we've shown this is true in a range of projects as well. Basically, these communities, the story is not that these communities and that our communities in Wikipedia have people have stopped wanting to participate. It's that these communities are rejecting contributions from newcomers at increasingly high rates, which has led to decreases in the rate in which our communities are retaining them. And so but that itself poses an interesting question of sort of why are peer production organizations, why is Wikipedia becoming more closed in ways that are cutting off this influx of participation, which is like the lifeblood, the sustaining force. And so I've spent a lot of the last 5 years or so trying to understand why, and I'm going to provide you with an answer or a proposed answer for this, which builds very briefly on sort of two major theoretical models that scholars have used to understand peer production. The first, and I'm going to do this very quickly, sort of conceives of Wikipedia, or as peer production more broadly, as being engaged in public goods provision. It's very easy to see why. Like the core examples of sort of public goods provisions of public goods are often things like useful knowledge. And what is Wikipedia if not a collection of useful knowledge? In the context of public goods, and the sort of the key challenge tends to be incentivizing broad participation in the first place. It's provision. How do you get people in the door? How do you get them to contribute? And openness in that sense, like openness to participation, the lack of sort of formal boundaries to participation is just good in the context of public goods. Now, one thing that's kind of cool about this particular session is that it's Future of the Commons. It has commons in the name. And of course, commons is like a particular lens or way of looking at peer production, which is not the one that people have traditionally sort of conceived of it, but it sort of draws from this work by sort of Elinor Ostrom, who is interested in things like natural resource commons. You can think of a fishery, this is a picture of a lobster fishery, or a forest, for example, or a watershed. And although, and generally speaking, in the context of commons, what you're concerned about is not provision. You don't have to make the fish. The fish kind of make themselves. What you're concerned about is appropriation. Things like overuse, people taking too many of the fish so that they can't reproduce, so on and so forth. And what's interesting is that from a commons perspective, openness is not obviously or necessarily a good thing. Openness actually allows for damaging forms of appropriation. And if you look at Elinor Ostrom's sort of most famous book, the thing that in some ways is the thing she got the Nobel Prize in economics for, the most famous thing is this list of 8 features of the 8 principles, they're often called, right? You can think of them as the 8 features of highly effective commons. And number 1 on the list is clearly defined boundaries, the ability to keep people out. Openness is not always necessarily a good thing. And so I think that these sort of point at different directions. And what I want to suggest is that understanding institutional dynamics around openness and closure and peer production, which is to say that sort of pile of papers that I showed you in a slide a little bit ago, provides a way of reconciling these two perspectives. And so this is sort of what I've been working on. This is a graphic. So far, this is a graphic summary of what I've shown you so far, right, about peer production life cycles. My answer to why is Wikipedia declining in terms of active contributors might be something like closure. Our communities are declining in terms of number of contributors because they're becoming increasingly closed to participation from those from those individuals, right? So you can see contributors go up and down, openness goes down. But even if that's that, but the question is then why? And what I want to argue is that we should my answer is going to sort of depend on 2 things. One is that we should conceive of these communities as building stocks of value. And that includes things like digital artifacts. It includes the articles in Wikipedia, but it also includes things like goodwill and reputation, reliability and consistency, right? Wikipedia may have a lot of information on it, right? But that value of that information is a function of the fact that people believe that information and that they're looking at that information and that we think that it contains useful things on it, right? And so we think of that as a stock of value that goes up. But critically, some of that value is appropriable. And it's appropriable through participation that essentially benefits some individuals at the expense of the collective, but only early on. The basic argument here is that Wikipedia in the early days, right, and peer production projects more broadly, Wikipedia didn't have a problem of vandalism when it was a website no one had heard of, right? But once it became big and successful, all of a sudden, lots of people showed up who didn't necessarily wish it well, and that as a result, it became increasingly closed in order to stop the bad stuff, which led to this decrease moving forward. So before I do that, I have to briefly explain what a value appropriation is. I already gave you one example. I already mentioned vandalism, and Wikipedia is a good example. Here is a very quick example which sort of illustrates the point. If you look at the Jeremy Renner, he's an actor. I mean, you can read his Wikipedia articles right up on the screen. He's an actor, singer, songwriter, velociraptor. There is like a meme. People think it's funny to go to the article on Wikipedia about Jeremy Renner in many languages and to edit it so that they say he's a dinosaur, that he's a velociraptor. And this has been happening for years. This is some edits from 2013. But the reason I'm pointing it is because of what happened. As a result of this vandalism, people sort of having fun, benefiting themselves at the expense of the collective. The result was that the Jeremy Renner article in English Wikipedia was protected. And actually, it was sort of locked down. And this has happened hundreds of thousands of times across many languages of Wikipedia. It is literally locked. These articles are locked so that new and unregistered users cannot contribute to them. And so that's basically my argument, is that and I have a formal mathematical model which I'm not going to walk you through. The basic story is that communities start out, and you start out with one problem, which is growing a stock of value, right? And Wikipedia had that problem, I don't know, circa 2001. And it was very successful in growing that stock of value. And it was only able to do so because it was very open to participation. But once it built that stock of value, it led to a virtuous cycle. The more good stuff was on Wikipedia, the more people wanted to come to Wikipedia to contribute in good ways, but also in bad ways. And as a way of stopping that bad stuff, the community made rules and filters and bots and so on, and page protection, which blocked some of that bad stuff, probably a disproportionately large number of that bad stuff, but also blocked some of that good stuff. And so what I want to sort of argue here is that we should think about we should think about governance and openness in the context of knowledge commons in this sort of governance framework. I sort of started out by looking at like sort of this kind of closure and this incoming sort of newcomer rejection. And I was just like, oh my gosh, closure is bad. How do we stop it? But what I'm suggesting is that actually in the mathematical model will even suggest that actually that some amounts of closure is actually like not just a rational strategy, it's actually the ideal strategy. These communities have become more difficult to contribute to. Wikipedia has become more difficult to contribute to, not because, I don't know, people like hate newcomers, but because newcomers are not all those newcomers sort of wish the community well. And so I think but it sets up a different challenge, which is how do you manage sort of governance challenges when you started out with one challenge, which was get people in the door, and that we now today have two challenges. One challenge is get people in the door. The second challenge is maintain the stock of value that we've already built, right? From increasing attacks by things like AI organizations, by things like attempts to undermine the legitimacy, by organized information campaigns, right? And I think that this involves, I think, not just arguing about whether openness is good or bad, but about like navigating a real set of trade-offs necessary to solve a real set of problems. So that's basically the argument that I have. And thanks for listening to that. To me rehearses. I've been working on this for a bit, and I'm happy to talk more. And I look forward to hearing the other talks and hearing from everyone in the conversation.
Thank you so much, Miko. So we'll move on now to our third panelist, Sandeep. Sandeep Gill is a manager in the content enablement team at the Wikimedia Foundation. He leads a team that supports organizers in the Wikimedia movement. Previously, he has worked primarily on supporting language equity in the movement, especially through initiatives like Wikisource Loves Manuscripts. Over to you, Sandeep.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sneha. I've also been a Wikipedian, especially contributing to Punjabi Wikipedia projects since 2009. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm very glad to be here with Runa and Meko and hearing their reflections, and especially the graphs you showed, Meko. I think they were really eye-opening, and how that's just everywhere across platforms. And I'll be, given that we are at this crucial moment, 25 years, and where do we go from here? I'll be talking about some of the other questions that do pop up from time to time. Um, for instance, one of them is AI. What's happening because of it? And we're seeing that that it is impacting our readership. But although at the same time, there is an increase in usage of Wikimedia content, although it's secondary. So most of the responses based on research do refer to Wikipedia or Reddit, and there was an article I was reading yesterday that both of them are one of the top answer generators for them in a way. But then that does keep those potential new contributors from coming to our projects and just kind of accessing that information through AI summaries or through these different engines. But yeah, but now I'm wondering, looking at Mako's presentation also, is that even if they would come to Wikipedia, we would have a bigger number in terms of page views. Maybe we still don't have a really welcoming community to help them integrate well. Even so like we do have a tool because of AI, but then there's changes. There's still plenty of people coming to our projects. How do we still kind of make sense of or kind of change our governance structures? I think that's a great point that Meko brought in. The other thing is that there's been a change in how we all look at or perceive, or how generally people are using the internet. Like in the old days, it was about accessing information there or contributing. But now there's been this monetization from the corporate to individual level of the internet at large, and how that kind of shifts individual motivations as well. Like why still some people would contribute, that's purely because of their passion. But then increasingly more and more people would see the option of contributing to other platforms that have the potential of generating revenue for them. And this becomes important, especially as traditional employment has been declining over the board, and internet is kind of the global employment generator. So in these two kind of scenarios or the stages of the internet that we are in, how do we then make sure that we have a sustainable knowledge ecosystem? And as both Runa and Meko said, that we need to perhaps think of deliberate efforts to ensure that. And what those deliberate efforts are going to be, I don't know. And I hope to discuss and talk with everyone here and kind of uncover what do we do. Over to you, Sneha.
Thanks so much, Sandeep. Thanks to all our panelists for those opening remarks. I think you've traced like sort of various contours of the discussion, many threads, I think, to understanding how open knowledge projects have grown and evolved, right? Especially over the last few years. So I wanted to sort of kick off our discussion also by putting this in sort of a larger context and bringing up this question around languages itself. And today being International Mother Language Day, if you know, all three of you could also share some reflections on, of course, you know, the impact of open knowledge projects in sustaining and fostering language, you know, linguistic diversity in the commons. And Wikipedia has played such an important role in that over these 25 years. Where do we see, you know, Wikipedia or other Wikimedia projects going from here, specifically from the point of linguistic diversity? How do we engage new languages, especially, you know, say oral or non-dominant languages, you know, in the global majority? Any reflections, any thoughts on this? So maybe we want to do the same order. Up to you. Yeah, who wants to go first?
We can follow the same order. That's okay. Gives Miko and Sandeep some breathing room. When it comes to the point that you are asking about, Sneha, in terms of like, how does this space open up to take in more languages on somewhat of an equal footing and develop their open commons content inventory in a certain way? I think this is where the key points highlighted by Miko's numerical data comes in handy, and the question in terms of what are the trade-offs that we are looking for. So first of all, when it comes to Wikimedia projects, the reality is that this is probably still one of the last remaining infrastructures on the internet where a lot of these languages can still build content without any, additional resource requirements. That is, if you have a project, if you have the space, if you have adequate compliance with the policies that are in place for the generation of knowledge on the Wikimedia platforms, you are able to create your commons inventory over there. So that's one part of it. Now, going to the point of like, how does this factor in with the resistance of that we have seen in the bigger wikis? Now, I think this is where the kind of the community structure comes into play, because whether it's Wikimedia projects or any other projects of this kind of a global scale, I don't think it's one community that we are talking about. It's a collection of many community units that build a whole, and you will see different dynamics in every corner. So where exactly is like a certain community unit that also connects to perhaps a low resource language or a non-dominant language, sits within that platform's boundaries, and then creates their own space, their own rules, their own points of association, and then continues to build, is where is probably where the activity will show up. This also connects to that second point that I was trying to make in my opening remarks, is that at one point we as users will also start demanding specifics for our own needs. So if a non-dominant low resource language comes in on a platform like Wikimedia project and demands that our cultural relevance, or the content or the commons connected to our cultural relevance is of a certain form, follows a certain kind of rules, and needs to be represented in a certain format, that is where we'll start seeing a lot of challenges to the existing dynamics, and finding spaces that will have to be yielded for that to sustain. And maybe it then starts off a very different trajectory of growth and community sustenance that we'll see over the time. This is like a very, I would say, just pulling at the threads or strings of that idea, but I guess there will be more ideas that we can see from Nico and Sadiq as they share their thoughts.
Nico, would you like to go next? Okay, sure. So, yeah, in terms of languages, Wikimedia is one of the most, everyone, I think I don't need to tell all of you this, so that's one of the most linguistically diverse platforms on the internet. So we do provide that space, yes, that, languages can come, but then not a lot beyond that, in that just the space. Okay, you can enter, but then what next? So I'll point to a couple of research projects that I've been a part of in the last couple of years. I'll share the links of them in the chat as I mentioned them. So the first one was a language onboarding experiment. Was done. Both of these were done in partnership with Runa's team. So yeah, in the first of the experiment, we picked 5 languages through a randomized trial or randomized process, and which were in the incubator. And if there's anyone here who doesn't know about the incubator, it is the a Wikimedia project where new languages that come in, and then if they're able to build enough people, like which is 3 active editors, and translate some of the interface, they are eligible to then have their own project, like their own Wikipedia or Wiktionary or any other different projects. So these 2 experiments were primarily focused on Wikipedia, since we are talking about the 25 years of Wikipedia. So I'll just focus on these 2 for now. So the first experiment was about incubator and 5 languages from different parts of the world, and kind of helping them in graduating from the incubator. And the idea was that incubator doesn't have a lot of advanced technology. You don't have features like content translation. Connecting with Wikidata is a bit complex. So if we provide them with their own separate domain and kind of expedite that process, these languages will then be able to flourish faster or better. But what we saw was that immediately after graduating, editorship declined on all the wikis. And this is, yeah, in a way, Mako, the graph was just within the incubator go up, after the incubator go down, which was mind-boggling. But then we looked at a lot of other data, and that this has been happening in the last like 10 or 15 years itself, that very new languages that do come outside of the incubator, there is a decline in editorship. And perhaps the reason is that there is no way forward for them. They don't know what to do. Are they competing with English Wikipedia? Are they supposed to have those many articles? What is it that they do? While they're in the incubator, they do have a goal. They do have set expectations, which is every month you need to have 3 editors who make at least 10 edits per month. And they try and do more of it, better of it, and they also have some interface translation goals. But after that, nothing. We don't provide any support whatsoever. So they're in the blank, and then yeah, they have achieved the goal that they had, which is having their own language Wikipedia, which kind of puts this language at par with another language perhaps in their region which has their own Wikipedia. So that's like, I think there's still more to research there, perhaps, on what exactly happens. But I believe it's probably the motivation that they don't know what to do next, and we don't provide any meaningful pathways or milestones to communities at all. So the next link which I've shared is the kind of a complementary research, not directly on incubator, but about the idea of what is it that a language Wikipedia should focus on. As I said earlier, like, are we all competing with English Wikipedia? Is that the target? Should all languages in all 300 plus versions have aspired to have as much content as that? Or do we define what is it that's important to us? Let's say as a language in Southern Africa, like Ndebele, decides that they will be working on these 1,500 articles that they think are the most important to their community, and that's it. They don't want to go beyond it. They don't want to focus on anything else. And once they've done it, they decide, okay, now we maintain this. We don't want to just forever try and seek growth in terms of content, but perhaps focusing on a specific number of articles and quality. So this second project is still underway. So there were 3 communities which were selected, with which interviews were done, and the communities have different motivations in how they prioritize what content they want to work on. Some are looking at readership, some are looking at educational curriculum, and some are looking at topics that matter the most to their specific contexts. But yeah, this is like an evolving conversation in a way. And a question I ask all of you as well. Like, I see editors from different Wikipedias here, like Odia or Punjabi. Like, what is the number we want to put ahead of us? Like 100,000 articles, or is it as much as English Wikipedia has? And do we want to also look at quality as a metric? Because currently we are probably not looking at it as much. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Over to you, Meko.
Sure. So I mean, I think it's a great question. I think that going last, I can sort of just emphasize some of the things that I think I've already heard from some of the other people. The first is that I think that there are just so many. I think this is in some parts the context for the question, but there's just so much opportunity here. There's been so much research and evidence that suggests that people prefer using the internet, including engaging with reference works online in their mother tongues, if that material exists, even if they languages.
Yeah, I think your audio is breaking up a bit.
Okay, how about now? Better? Okay.
Yes.
Did you get any of that? Yes. No. Start again. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to say that I think that there are the first thing is that I think that there are so many opportunities here. I think that the people prefer. There's a lot of evidence and research that have been done that suggests that people prefer. They prefer using the internet and reference works in their mother tongue if that material exists. There's evidence, including some work that I've done with Shaimandu Dasgupta, which suggests that actually that like some experiments where people have been basically due to browser misconfiguration have been given a website in a language other than their mother tongue, and that actually we can show that they learned more and quickly if they were engaging in their mother tongue than if they were engaging in another language. So I think that this is like there's a lot of opportunity here and a lot of like need and desire. And I think that towards some of Satip's opening remarks, Wikipedia is just so important and plays such a unique role in this space. There's just nothing. It fills a gap that simply doesn't exist in the vast majority of languages in which it's available. And I think that it's just really important, like like Wikipedia itself it is. I think that Wikipedia editions, I mean, I think that my main sort of like addition would be, I think, to again maybe emphasize something that Sadeep was saying about thinking systematically about the kinds of challenges that communities are facing, doing things like experiments, trying to learn about these sort of challenges. My sense is that like Wikipedia editions in non-dominant languages face a really distinct set of problems. Some of these are problems of scale. Many of them are actually just, they're smaller communities, and that means they face challenges that larger communities don't, right? There's issues of governance capture. I've written some work about the I don't know, the Wikipedians probably know about this, the Croatian Wikipedia was like essentially captured by like a relatively, like all the governance in the system was captured by a set of political extremists and turned into a site of like sort of like disinformation for almost a decade. And this is just not a challenge. This is something that can happen in a smaller community. There's also just lack of resources for mobilizing tools, like access to tools within the Wikimedia context becomes a challenge. I think there are also problems that are just related to languages being like sort of relatively like sort of low resource in general. And you're very familiar with a lot of these sorts of things. This is like access to, you know, like source material in terms of other places, which is very useful for Wikipedia and sort of tools, so on and so forth. And then I think the third thing to point out is that actually there are a set of, many of these problems are actually quite specific to the cultural contexts of the individual language editions, right? That like you can solve the problem in one place. And that doesn't mean that that's in the sense that you might build a great community in one place. And that doesn't mean that the kinds of things that that community will be able to do will be easy to transport, that the right solution. And this is actually something that I've taken from, I mentioned Eleanor Ostrom, right? Like she's like a big feature of a lot of her scholarship around natural resource commons is that like what she says, there's no panacea, and she really rejected the idea that there were sort of like one size fits all bits. I did a paper which maybe some people here have seen with Sejal Khatri and Shaiminda Dasgupta and Aaron Shaw a number of years ago about 3 different Indian language Wikipedia editions. That was sort of comparing how things had sort of played out in those different contexts. And part of the answer, and part of our answer about why these communities looked so different, is that the sort of the broader sort of like cultural and like socio-political context of the different regions where they were, which is really different. And one thing that's interesting is that it actually looks like that part of the story that we showed 10 years ago seems to have actually really changed. That the way in which those communities are sort of playing out today seems to be really different. So I think that coming up with a solution for a particular period of time might not be a long-term solution as well. But I think that all of that is to say that I think thinking systematically about the nature of the kinds of challenges, what are the kinds of solutions which are features of scale, and what are the kinds of things we can do to address that in general? What are the kinds of challenges that low resource languages in general face, and how can we like address those? And what are the kinds of things that are sort of maybe more culturally specific, and how can we engage in that space as well? And I think that just thinking systematically in that regard is like I think like at least the approach that I'm like most excited about in terms of working in this space.
Great. Thanks so much for those responses. So I think we already have some questions from the audience in the chat, and we could actually open up the floor for discussion. Just checking if folks want to, you can just quickly, do go ahead, Raminda.
At the incubated part is a bit difficult to work on. So about a year back, I was helping the Tamil and the Malayalam Wikipedians to get the Tamil and Malayalam Wikivoyage out of the incubator. But when I started working in the incubator, most of the tools were not working. For example, the interactive map, that was not working. The Wikivoyage banner that we have at the top of every article was not working. The back pointing part, the place where you put in the coordinates, the latitude and longitude in the OpenStreetMap, map, that part was also not working. Many of the features are not working. So it becomes extremely difficult for a new person, as a person who is maybe familiar with Wikipedia or other projects, to come and work in Wikivoyage when most of the tools are not working. So can there be certain changes made in the incubated part? Yes, Sadip, so can this be done?
Yeah, since Runa is the most technical person here, I'll just pass this question to Runa.
I can say a little bit, but not a lot, because the incubator, like Sandeep mentioned, it's a different project. And also, I'm not speaking on behalf of the foundation here. I'm just talking from past knowledge. What we have seen in the past is because of the way the incubator had been set up, there has been a definite, like, it's failed to catch up with everything else uh, that is in production. When we say production, any of the websites that are running as live projects, so there is going to be, like, a very uphill task to actually bring the incubator on par with any of the other projects, especially because of, like, a whole lot of, like, additional tools run on these specific projects. So whether you're talking about like Wikipedia itself is like on the incubator, any of the Wikipedia projects are already like way imbalanced. Wiki Voyage is even like, I would say, worse off.
Worse.
So it is. I mean, the balance is very, very misaligned. So it would be a hugely uphill task to bring things at par for you to be able to, like, be able to make significant the kind of changes that you're talking about, that you would like to have a replicable uh, project on which you can start building the content that you can then move into production. Because one of the things to just remember is the incubator is an incubator. It's not something where you will be able to do everything in the exact form and shape. The purpose of the incubator is to help people at least generate that first batch of content, which will then go into the live project whenever it becomes live. So there is also, by design, a less I would say intentional setup, which is expected to be low maintenance. It's for only the starting point for the project to get started on, and then move on to the main project. So short answer, I would not put a lot of expectations on the incubator to change very heavily at this point of time. But then maybe if you're having this conversation at another time with the engineers of the Wikimedia Foundation, they might have a different answer down the line if there's a different change in priority.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Runa. And thank you, Mako, for appreciating Wikivoice. So the thing is that, the thing problem is that we get demotivated. So when I started working out there and I just typed in the codes and saw the codes are not coming in this thing, the incubator, Wikivoice incubator. So, but things can be, it can be done. I think it's a long process and a difficult process, I can understand. And so, but if it can be done, it would be more easier for at least some of the tools. Some of the tools is coming in, so it will be easier for the new editors to get a motivation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ramunda. Just checking for any other questions. I think Anshul had shared a comment in the chat about resources, right? That we also need more resources in regional languages to help new users to get around the wiki environment. Yes,
Yeah.
just checking. Yeah, if you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I'll just like to ask a clarificatory question to Anchal. What kind of resources do you mean here that should be created? Anchal, can you hear me?
Sorry, can you repeat it? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, no worries. I'll repeat. So you write in the comment that we need more resources in regional languages. What kind of resources are you talking about here?
Like resources in the sense, like to get along, like media wiki resources, which we find like it is very documented and heavy, wordings, and new user get to know, like we get very confused with that. So I need something very on simple language or in the regional language, so that they can get it how to work and how to contribute in that technical part, or as well as in the front end also. So that was my
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I've also heard from some communities and just and read in their plans as well that they plan to create video tutorials, and those some of those have been created as well to make it easier, because just that written documentation work well for certain cultural contexts, and for certain other people like to visualize or to see it, and in some others they want someone to sit next to them and tell them how this project works, and then it also differs from person to person. um, yeah, so and I think the main challenge here is the small number of people we have in regional languages who are also creating content. They're also most of the people are doing all the same set of people are doing the different tasks, so they're also looking at creating new content, which has been their main focus, but also clean up, reverting any vandalism that occur from time to time. So I think it's just has not been the main focus for most languages to kind of think about documentation as much. So yeah, we need to think of different ways and how we can not put this as an additional burden on that same set of small number of people, um, who are admins on these small, like these regional, or just not regional but just these underdeveloped Wikipedias or developing. Yeah, we do need them, but I don't know what's the best approach. Who is going to do it?
Thanks for that question, Anchal. And I think Sony has also just shared a response in the chat. Sony, did you want to speak a little bit more by voice?
Hi, first of all, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you very much. It was a lovely conversation, and I'm glad I could make it. I think since the question of resources came up and Sandeep was probing a little bit as to what else can be done, I thought I must, flag at least two concerns. And it's not something that can be done overnight, and I'm very, very sure about that. But I just see a lot of things happening for low resource languages in the open source software setup itself, where wiki can actually lead the way rather than use whatever exists out there, right? So I think if Wikimedia, media wiki, or the community in general can come up with things like multi-scriptal fluency, and simple things like, or even if you leave languages aside, simple setup for which Nivas helped me was, I was finding it very difficult to convert M4A kinds of files to OGG. So I think we need the developing community and language communities should sit together and maybe create sources if they do not exist. So I see Wiki being very, very useful on that particular front. I mean, again, it's a personal rant, but I hope it makes sense for other low resource languages as well. That's all. Thank you.
I'll just add one comment here. That Sony, I think as of a couple of years ago, you can now also upload MP3 format files on Commons.
I tried. It is not working. I'll send you the screenshots.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do. I can just send an
Yeah.
example of an existing MP3 file,
Okay.
which
Okay.
kind of just does show that MP3 is allowed, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's some other
Yeah.
reason that
Okay.
I'm not aware of.
Okay, fine. The other thing is, at a personal level, Sandeep, the transliteration thing that you installed on my device sort of wiped off because I cleared my cache. So I'll be, coming back to you once again to help me reinstall it. Yeah, thank you.
And we also see Dev Jadya, who's a technical contributor, chipping in the comment that they're willing to help in technical areas and improve tools and functionalities. So maybe, yeah, we have some collaboration budding here already.
Right. Thanks. Just checking for other questions. So I think while we're thinking of more questions, I think there's this one point that I think has been a big bone of contention across most open knowledge platforms, and for the digital commons itself, which is, AI, emerging technologies, and what has been the impact of that on the commons, right? So just checking for reflections. Just wanted to ask if there are any thoughts on this. I'm sure we have a lot to say, but yeah, I think specifically, thinking about the sort of milestone that Wikipedia has achieved, but also there have been concerns from various, not just the Wikimedia projects, but the open knowledge projects at large, digital commons at large, in terms of fair use, in terms of infrastructure, the demands that emerging technologies very often have of large, knowledge infrastructure projects. Are there any thoughts, reflections that you would like to share?
I can go again first. So I think the obvious reactions that we are seeing is the question of fairness that we have also seen Wikimedia projects, the Wikimedia Foundation, and a whole lot of others talking about, not just for the open digital common goods that Wikimedia projects have to offer, but a lot of other organizations as well. So I think the bigger headline over here has always been about fairness and the reuse of the content that's like out there for the common good of people and society. And this is where I think Marcus' question about the point about earlier about the appropriation comes in, that different kinds of appropriation do show up over here when you're trying to offer something for free, or for not just free as in money, but free as in freely distributable. There are going to be unfair practices that are going to come around this. But on the other hand, this is like the format of that technology being developed that will dip into this store all the time. So this is where I think that unevenness of the challenge that I was talking about in my opening remarks will again show up and it's already showing up, and it will show up continuously, that there's going to be another cycle of the habits and the demands from the users looking for AI supported enabled tools to make their life easy, but at the same time that also goes and from the other side comes and dips into the work that they have manually created over the years through pretty difficult conditions of that time. So this sustainable balance at this juncture, I think it's an interesting watch. I don't think any of us have good solutions. There's a whole lot of conversations about governance, fair use, and talking about maybe even the supply chain of the content that feeds into this system. All of that comes together at this point of time. And then of course, the imbalance in terms of the non-dominant languages or content in non-dominant languages versus what's available in other languages, that automatically again tips the balance of the development of these new tools in the dominant languages becoming faster and more convenient compared to the non-dominant languages. But then there's a big difference compared to earlier years, because at this point of time, the effects of that technology, or even the immediate usable components of those technology, are actually penetrating much widely across the globe at this point of time. So it's not like someone in in my city is seeing a generative AI enabled tool like 5 years after someone has seen them in San Francisco or something like that. They're all seeing it at the same time. So the demands and the conversations are moving at a much faster pace of like, when do I get this in my language, or can I have it more culturally contextualized for my use at this point of time. So this social technical, and I think like the governance pieces that are all influencing a very fast and developing ecosystem is interesting, but at the same time, I think it's also challenging us very heavily in terms of what exactly do we ask of it to serve our use cases on the open and digital common goods areas of work.
Sure. So I think that most Wikimedia, the Wikimedia movement, like basically almost every other organization in the broader sort of like free culture, free software movement, has like what is effectively a two-part mission. The first part is about sort of like producing, you know, high quality knowledge about the world and providing that to everybody. And then the second part is about encouraging people to, or like providing people with an opportunity to not just be consumers of information, but to like allow a broader group of people to engage in production, right? And I think that AI offers like a complicated set of threats. I think that it has, there's some things that AI that like some things about the sort of like recent changes caused by sort of like AI companies that or new AI technology that are just kind of like obviously bad for the Wikimedia movement. Some of that includes like just like huge amounts of resources which are being devoted to like essentially just like dealing with like kind of like server infrastructure, right? Just like a large proportion of all like requests to pages. And it's kind of a bad look to be collecting lots of money from, you know, like donations and then using that to support like the wealthiest, most highly funded organizations, like, you know, like companies on earth. And I think that the foundation has actually been doing a pretty good job of addressing those things through the Wikimedia Enterprise program and some other things as well. There are new kinds of attacks on content or on governance systems. And I think that like you can just write bots to engage in Wikipedia. I mean, like sock puppeting is a lot easier today than it was you know, a couple of years ago. And I don't know that we have even a clear sense of what the nature and shape of that threat is, much less exactly what it is that we're going to do about it. But I think that it's a real risk. In the most like sort of low resource languages, it's maybe less of a risk, but that's probably not going to be the case for forever. I think that the big threat that AI offers is actually around, or things around disintermediation, which is like, people use this to refer to the fact that like people used to get the Wikipedia information by going to like wikipedia.org website and getting the information that way. And now they're getting it from like a, you know, like a Google search summary or a chatbot or something like this, right? And that's resulting in things that are now, you know, like for the first time really ever, I've showed you this decreased editorship, which has been going on for like, at this point, most of Wikipedia's life. But the viewership, the decreases in viewership are much more recent. And seem to be being driven by this disintermediation. Not just AI, some of it was before. Google's been doing the search summaries for a long time, but I think that that's happening more, and it does seem to be attributable to AI. Now, I think that disintermediation from the perspective of that mission, right, going back to the mission, like if the goal is to produce lots of high quality information and give it to people, the fact that they're getting that information through like a better, easier interface for them is not necessarily a problem, right? The goal of the Wikimedia movement was not to increase the number of page views on wikipedia.org web pages, right? Like I was involved early on in like a lot of attempts to create like offline Wikipedia readers, and like those things, like we're not going to be increasing the number of views to Wikipedia, like web pages. And that wasn't a problem, right? It is a problem for things like donations to the Wikimedia Foundation in various places, which leads to differences in terms of like monetary resources, which are very important. And the big thing that it does is it separates the sort of like the locus of consumption, where it is people are reading it, from the locus of production, right? So to the extent that like those people are getting their answers in one place, there's no edit button on your there's no edit button in your like AI summary, right? If you're talking to ChatGPT or something, right? And worse than that, when you tell ChatGPT, hey, that's not right, ChatGPT, like OpenAI, learns that and it goes and is used for subsequent training of their models, but that information never makes it back to the commons, right? And so that disintermediation is very bad for the flow of information, whether that's in the form of new potential editors who are now consuming Wikimedia content, good, in places which which make it more difficult for them to contribute bad. That's bad. And exactly how to untangle this and what to do about it is really complicated. I think that work to and I don't know, some of this might be in the form of regulation, or some of this might be like changes in terms of licensing, but things to help sort of like connect those things so that if someone notices something that's wrong or points out something that's wrong, that it gets back into if it comes from the commons, can it get back to the commons? That to me feels like it's the most important thing, right? And if someone like wants to engage with it, maybe through AI, that's sort of useful. I think that there's also a range of opportunities. I don't have as like clear a list of this. I don't know. You always think more about the bad stuff than the good stuff. I think that there are absolutely lots of examples of AI already doing things to improve editor efficiency. Machine translation is the big one. It's just like having starting out with even a bad translation is like so useful, as I'm sure many of you know. Ways to allow different kinds of people to contribute. I think that that's really unexplored potential in that space. And I think ways of solving kinds of problems that are not necessarily about like editor efficiency, but like highlighting certain kinds of things. I've seen really interesting work that people are doing. Christian Danescu-Misulescu-Mizil at Cornell is doing some interesting work where he's like looking at conversations between editors on Wikipedia and like kind of noticing when the conversation is going in kind of like a bad direction, and can kind of say like, hey, I think if you continue down this line of conversation, maybe you want to cool down a little bit. This is going to lead to like the kind of blow up that might result in a ban or something like that, ways that are just bad for the community, right? So I think that there's lots of cool opportunities there as well. So I don't know. I think it's a mixed bag. I think that we got to think, again, think systematically about the kinds of threats. But I also think that there's a lot of pretty cool opportunities, and I'm interested in, thinking about how we can think through the opportunities as well.
Yeah, and I'll focus on the cool opportunities while recognizing there's so many problems with it. And as Miko said, there are some cool opportunities. So I'll talk about one of the projects. So this is not Wikipedia, and also not generative AI as such. This is not chatbots or audiovisual generation. This is about AI-driven transcription, and this was a talk I delivered along with partners from the British Library and the Read Cooperative at the British Library in December last year. So this is just an excerpt, a small part of that talk. We're talking about how Wikimedia projects and collaborative AI kind of come together. So in this kind of project, Read Co-op, which is the AI technology, it is a cooperative, so not like the other big tech. So it's kind of at the intersection where it becomes easier for us to work with them. And British Library, kind of it plays its own role in making sure we have access to the right kind of content. And then we, obviously our biggest strength is not that we have a website, but that we've been able to create this culture of contribution. So the people. So yeah, so when we talk about AI for transcription, there are two types. One is community extracted, and this is also AI for the larger, broader type of AI as well, like chatbots and all. So there is like community extracted AI, but then this is not the only way AI can be created. There can be community-based AI tools as well. And Transcribus is one such tool where we give it a specific set of pages or images or text to train it on that specific set as only. So instead of it also uses less resources. It's not a general purpose. It's more specialized AI model, which makes it much more efficient in terms of both accuracy, but also in terms of the power that it uses. So yeah, and it's easy to create. So people, communities all over the world have been using and working with Transcribus as this tool. And we worked with Transcribus and British Library, and then we were inspired by the Balinese community in Indonesia, and we which was working on documenting their handwritten manuscripts. So based on that, we kind of scaled that up and worked with a few different communities in Indonesia and digitized more pages, engaged more Wikimedians or new and experienced over there. But after that, we decided to create a model on Transcribus with those based on the documents that the Javanese community has been working on Wikisource. And it is an example of that. And this is not a success story just yet, because when we worked, and as you see, this quite complex writing and quite different types of handwritten manuscripts here. So when we worked on this and we had a small number of pages, like a few hundred only, we were not able to produce a really good model. And as you see, this character error rate is 97%. So maybe it could only guess out of 100 only 3 characters correctly. So this failed. But then we went back to the Javanese community and asked them that, okay, this happened, we need more data, can you work on it? And then the Javanese community told us that actually we don't even have an OCR, let alone talk about an HTR. So OCR is optical character recognition, HTR is handwritten text recognition. So they're both also in a way, OCR can be used more broadly. But so what they told us is that we don't even have an engine that works on print books, let alone think about the HTR. So maybe we pivot. Let's create a model that works on print first, and then we can go to the handwritten works. So they gave us these 3 texts that you see here. So still some variation in the content or in the writing style and font styles. But this time we had a bigger set, like 500 pages or so. And that's still not very huge if we look at that it is going to help us transcribe any other books in Javanese. It's still a small set of pages, and this worked. This is a screenshot from Javanese Wikisource, and as you can see, there is the image on the right side, and that's the transcription on the left. And I can although I know no one's here who can verify the accuracy of that text. It could be 97% error rate itself, but I can just assure you that I've gotten this checked by a Javanese contributor, and they say that this is pretty good quality, and there are a few errors that they still have to correct, which is in most other engines as well that we use. But this is now have become the only model that they use, because this is the only one available. But they've been using it successfully to transcribe many more pages on Javanese Wikisource. And now the community is also, they've transcribed for handwritten text like 500-600 pages as well. So they're going to create a handwritten text recognition model as well. And generally, we just saw that there's just more love for historical documents. People across Wikimedia movement are working on it now. After we did that project, like in Archive Nepal, they've digitized manuscripts in Nepal. So that community is budding in here in India as well. There's been more initiatives going on. And yeah, just a few months back, we also had, based on the efforts that the Archive Nepal put in, they've now started transcribing them, and next up they are going to then create a specialized model for their documents. Yeah, and with that, um, I'll leave you and just give you that there's a little bit of hope in how we harness and use this technology. Thanks.
Right. Thanks so much, Runa, Miko, and Sandeep, for those responses. I think you've also highlighted, as much as there are concerns, there are also affordances to new technologies, and I think we need to think about that and think about how to collectively also, like you mentioned, harness the sort of power of those technologies. And see where they help with sustainability, help with only sort of building the commons, making it more robust. We have about 5 minutes left in our session. I'm just going to quickly check if there are any responses from the group, anything that you wanted to ask our speakers. Okay, great. So I will just check if there are any closing comments from the speakers themselves. Runa, Miko, Sandeep, anything that you wanted to flag, any last words that you wanted to leave us with as sort of takeaways?
Sorry, before
Oh, okay,
we
great.
speakers, right?
Then go ahead. Go ahead.
Actually, let's do this. Do the speakers have anything? No. We have asked you. We have asked you for more than an hour. Right. I think I'm not sure if these should have been opening remarks or closing remarks, but I wanted to give a little bit of context to the speakers and also to everybody who's here. When we wanted to start thinking about this particular conversation, we were looking at three distinct conversations which would come together. The first one was research, and Mako, you have held that forth very well. Thank you very much. The second one was technology, but technology not in the sense of this is how code is written, but the community aspect of the technology, or what does technology do to communities. And that's where Runa became a very important point of contact for us. And then we also wanted the community to interact with these two largely abstract ideas of what the community think about technology, what the research speaks to the community, all of these. So that's how this entire conversation. But there are two other things that were very interesting to us when we started to put together. The first one was everybody thinks of Wikipedia as a utilitarian consumerist project. That oh, there is something here, we will all come, we will make use of that. But that use can't just be I've read an article or I have downloaded an article or I've made it. That use should also be with the one that thinks about what new technological possibilities are there, what new community-led direction, what new, what new questions of research does a project. So that was one aspect of the conversation that we wanted to shift, pivot, and you have raised a lot of interesting insights. I'm hoping that people who are here. The last point that I want to make here is that the future of the commons when we started thinking about it, we thought about it as a very neat and dark experiment. Saying that everybody has made use of commons, earlier it was big tech, now it is screaming. Is there really a future? But every time we bring in a speaker, whether to talk about a specific project or tool or even an abstract idea of the commons, we get reassured saying that of all the things that are happening in the world, people are still committed to the idea of knowledge. People are still invested in concept of knowledge. People are still building technology that could people and movements first and not take it away just to a closed paper project. It is in this spirit that we wanted to remember that India has had 25 years, and I'm sure it will have a few more years, both with vitality and also with new ideas coming. On that note, thank you very much, Neko, and Sati, for being with us, for having this conversation. I also want to thank everybody at the API for doing a lot of back and forth. I know that this wasn't an easy call to arrange. So thank you very much, all of you. Lovely have it. Have a good Friday evening for Meko and for all of us. Have a good Saturday.
Thanks once again to all three of our speakers. I think those were great closing remarks. Thanks for that. And yes, thank you so much to everyone for joining. We'll be back again next month with our next FoC session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
This was great. I really appreciated the opportunity and learning from everybody else here.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. See you all.
See you. Bye.